The sound was flat. Not loud, flat. The kind of sound that doesn't need to echo because it lands exactly where it was aimed. My head snapped sideways. A champagne flute fell off the table and shattered on the patio stone. 30 guests went completely still. And in that silence, I stood with the taste of copper on my tongue and a leather wallet on the ground between us and understood, clearly and finally, that there was nothing left in this house worth staying for. My adoptive father, Frank Dalton, had just slapped me across the face at his own 55th birthday party. In front of his church friends, his coworkers, his neighbor who had watched me mow his lawn for 7 years and never once asked if I was paid. The reason he gave: a wallet I had spent 3 months saving to buy him. The real reason? 2 weeks earlier, I had refused to sign a document that would have given him permanent legal control over my finances. And Frank Dalton was not accustomed to being told no. One person stood up. Ruth Paxton, the neighbor, 70 years old, 5 feet tall. She said, "Frank, that was uncalled for. He told her to stay out of his family's business." She sat back down, but she did not look away from me. I have never forgotten that. My name is Anna. I am 21 years old. I walked out of that house that night with a backpack, $340 in cash, and a bruise already blooming purple on my cheekbone. I did not know that within hours, a stranger in a black SUV would say 5 words that would tear 18 years of carefully constructed lies down to the foundation. I also did not know that I had been carrying the evidence in my backpack for 6 months without understanding what it was. That a government envelope at the bottom of a garbage bag Frank had thrown out would turn out to be the single most important document of my life. That the neighbor who was the only person in that backyard to stand up for me would later take the stand in a courtroom and make sure the record reflected what she had seen. But I'm getting ahead of myself. This story starts at 5 in the morning with a 2-page handwritten list and a closet that had no window. That is where it has to start. Because the ending only makes sense once you understand what 18 years of living inside someone else's lie actually looks like from the inside. Before I go any further, if you're here right now, thank you. Tell me where you're watching from and what time it is there. Drop it in the comments. I read every single one, and it genuinely means more than I can say. I had set my alarm for 5 that morning because Sandra had left a 2-page list on the counter the night before. Sweep the patio, set up 32 chairs, press the tablecloth, slice lemons by hand because the dishwasher leaves spots on the platters. My room was in the basement, not the finished part, the storage closet next to the water heater. No window, a twin mattress Frank had dragged in from the curb when I was 9, a wool blanket that smelled like cardboard no matter how many times I washed it. My sister Tara's room was upstairs. Queen bed, a vanity mirror ringed with Hollywood bulbs. She was 23 and still had her credit card linked to Frank's account and had never learned to cook a meal, because that was what I was for. I had been saving for Frank's gift since July. A real leather wallet, $84 wrapped in craft paper because I couldn't afford a bag. Tara gave him an Apple Watch, $700 charged to her emergency credit card. Frank kissed her forehead and said she always knew what her old man liked. He did not look at me. For 3 hours, I carried trays and refilled glasses while the party ran itself. When a woman from Frank's office asked Sandra whether I should sit down and eat with the guests, Sandra smiled her warm closed-door smile and said I liked to help, that it was my way of showing gratitude. She added, "You know how it is with the adopted ones. I kept carrying trays, the gift opening, Frank at the head of the table, 30 guests with champagne." I came forward with the craft paper package. He tore it open, turned the wallet over twice, held it up like a piece of evidence, and said, "What kind of worthless junk is this?" He stood. The chair scraped the stone. And then the flat sound, the broken flute, the silence. I had been living in that house for 18 years. I had cooked every meal, cleaned every surface, walked 90 minutes each way to my restaurant shifts because Frank wouldn't give me a ride. I had no birth certificate, no state ID, no social security card. Frank controlled all of it. I didn't know it then, but he had built that cage 1 bar at a time, deliberately, over years, because a person without documents cannot easily leave. I went to the storage closet, pulled the faded backpack from its nail, and packed in 10 minutes. 2 shirts, 1 pair of jeans, toothbrush, phone charger. $340 in ones and fives from my waitressing tips, hidden in a shoebox under the mattress because Frank monitored my bank account. And one more thing. A manila envelope I had pulled from a garbage bag 6 months earlier when Frank had thrown out my belongings to make room for Tara's yoga equipment. The return address had a state seal and the words, Virginia Department of Social Services. Inside was a document I didn't fully understand, something about adoption assistance disbursements, with my name typed across the top. I had carried it for 6 months without knowing why. I walked through the living room. The party had resumed. Frank was laughing. Tara was showing the video to guests near the doors. Sandra stood at the window and watched me cross the yard. She reached for the curtain and pulled it closed. Nobody called my name. I had been walking for maybe 2 miles when headlights slowed behind me. A black Cadillac Escalade. Clean, tinted Virginia plates. It rolled to a stop 20 feet ahead. The rear door opened. Every instinct said run. But I was so exhausted from running from things that I stood still and decided to see what was running toward me. A man stepped out. Mid-50s. Tall, charcoal coat, dark hair threaded with silver. And his eyes, hazel green, wide set, were the same eyes I looked at in my bathroom mirror every single morning. Behind him, a woman. Red-haired, leather portfolio, the posture of someone who had just left a courtroom. The man's hands were shaking. He said his name was Daniel Whitmore. His voice cracked on the second word. He said he believed he was my biological father. I took a step back and told him that wasn't possible. My biological parents hadn't wanted me. That was what I had been told my whole life. He said I had been told wrong. He reached into his coat and produced a photograph, small and creased from being handled hundreds of times. A woman on a porch swing holding a toddler. Auburn hair, cheekbones like mine, a smile that leaned slightly left. The toddler had hazel green eyes. Her name was Catherine, he said. She was my mother. She had died in a car accident when I was 2, and he had spent every single day since looking for me. The red-haired woman, Margaret Cole, family law attorney, explained the rest. While Daniel had been in the ICU after the accident, a social worker named Leonard Greer had presented family court with a document, a voluntary relinquishment of parental rights, signed by Daniel Whitmore. The judge approved the adoption. The file was sealed. Daniel had never signed anything. He had been on a ventilator. He had hired investigators year after year. He said the cost didn't matter. His voice only wavered when he said the word everything. I pulled the manila envelope from my backpack. Margaret unfolded it under the dome light. Her expression shifted the way a card player's shifts when the final card turns. She said it was an adoption subsidy record. The state of Virginia had been paying Frank and Sandra Dalton approximately $810 per month for my care and maintenance. For 18 years. A total of roughly $175,000. She asked how much of it I had ever seen. I thought of the curb mattress, the blanket that smelled like cardboard, the closet with no window. None, I said. Daniel turned his face toward the glass. In the reflection, I could see him pressing his jaw shut so hard the muscle jumped. All those years, I said, Frank called me a burden, but I was never a burden. I was a paycheck. Margaret drove us to a hotel near downtown. Clean, quiet, safe. Separate rooms with an adjoining door. The first thing I did was stand in the middle of mine and just breathe. White sheets that smelled like detergent. A window? I opened the curtains and looked at the parking lot lights for a long time, because looking out a window from a room that was mine was something I had not done in years. In the morning, I told Daniel directly. I needed proof. Not the photograph, not the story. A DNA test. If he was who he said he was, the science would confirm it. If he wasn't, I needed to know that too. He didn't flinch. He said, of course. Margaret had already located an accredited lab in Richmond. We could go that day. No guilt, no pressure, no performance of hurt feelings at being asked. Just, of course. I had spent 21 years in a house where asking a question was treated as a personal attack. A man who answered like questions were natural was entirely new to me. The lab was clean and clinical. A technician swabbed both our cheeks. Results in 3 to 5 business days. While we waited, Daniel brought photographs to the hotel. Not gifts, pieces. An album of Catherine pregnant, laughing. Catherine and Daniel in front of a brick bungalow with a red front door. A baby with hazel green eyes being held on a hospital blanket. He told me the bungalow was still his. He had never been able to sell it. I studied each photograph like I was memorizing a document. My mother's hands, her posture, the way she stood with her weight on her left foot. The same way I stand when I'm not thinking about it. On the 5th day, Margaret called. 99.998% probability of paternity. I held the phone and looked at the album and felt something crack open in my chest. Not break, open. The way a door opens when someone finally turns the handle from the right side. Then Margaret said, "Now we have enough. The next step is court. If this story is connecting with something real, thank you for being here. Hit subscribe and drop me a comment. It keeps me going more than you know." Let me tell you what Frank did not know was coming. The night before the hearing, according to Sandra's testimony and the text she would later surrender as evidence, Frank sat at the oak dining table I had polished every week for 18 years and rehearsed his testimony with his lawyer. A general practitioner from a strip mall office who had never handled an adoption fraud case in his life. Frank said he had all the paperwork, that he was a known member of his church, that he had been a generous man to take in a child nobody else wanted. He did not know that Margaret had assembled a 3-inch file of forged signatures, bribery records, and a forensic examiner's report. He did not know that the girl he had raised to be silent had found her voice. He walked into that courtroom like a man who had never lost. Richmond Family Court. A Tuesday morning in late October. Old federal brick, column entrance, hallway floors that echoed every footstep. I arrived at 8:30 with Daniel on my left and Margaret on my right. Navy blazer, white blouse, hair pulled back. No jewelry. I didn't own any. But my back was straight and my hands were steady. Frank arrived 10 minutes later. Gray suit, Donna on his arm, Tara trailing behind. His lawyer carried a single folder. Frank carried his chin at the angle of a man who considers a court appearance a minor inconvenience. Then he saw us. His eyes registered the blazer, the posture, the banker's box Margaret's paralegal was setting on the plaintiff's table. His face didn't crumble. It recalibrated. The rapid arithmetic of a man who controls every variable suddenly encountering one he missed. Margaret presented 5 stacks of evidence with the calm precision of a surgeon. The DNA results. 99.998%. Irrefutable. The forensic handwriting analysis. Dr. Elena Marsh had compared the signature on the relinquishment form to 20 verified samples of Daniel's handwriting spanning 2 decades. Her conclusion, 1 sentence. The signature was not produced by Daniel Whitmore's hand with a high degree of scientific certainty. The financial records, Gerald and Sandra Dalton had received $810 per month in state adoption assistance for approximately 216 months. Total, $174,960. A social worker's assessment confirmed none of it had been used for my welfare. The bank records, a wire transfer of $5,000 from Frank's personal checking account to Leonard Greer's personal account, dated 6 days before the adoption was finalized. And Ruth Paxton, 70 years old, navy cardigan, sensible flats. She testified without drama. She had watched me maintain that family's property for 12 years. She had never seen me sit at their table when guests were present, and she had personally watched Frank strike me across the face at his birthday party because he considered my gift beneath him. When Margaret asked Frank directly about the $5,000 payment, he said it had been a community donation. Margaret produced a photograph of Frank and Leonard Greer standing together at a church picnic a year before the adoption, both smiling. Then she placed the bank statement beside it. Direct account to account. Not the church account. Greer's personal account. Frank's composure cracked upward. He stood and said he had given me 18 years, a home, food, everything, and this was the thanks he got. The judge told him to sit down. In the gallery, the church women stared at their laps. The courthouse reporter's pen moved faster. I had told Margaret the night before that I wanted to speak. Not because the case needed it, the documents were enough, but because I had been silent for 21 years and some things need to be said by the person who lived them. The judge permitted it. I stood, hands at my sides, and looked at her, not at Frank. I said I was not there for revenge. I said that for 21 years I had not known my own name, my mother's face, or that anyone had been looking for me. I described what Frank's version of everything had actually looked like: a storage closet, a curbside mattress, no medical care after age 14, no identification documents, no right to my own history. I said Frank had hit me at his party not because of a wallet, but because I had told him no for the first time in 18 years. I said I was not asking the court to punish him. I was asking the court to tell the truth, because I had earned at least that much. Then something happened that nobody expected. Sandra stood up. Not from the witness stand, from the respondent's bench. She smoothed the front of her dress and said, "Your Honor, I have something I need to say." Frank grabbed her wrist. She pulled free. I had never seen her pull free of anything. She told the court she had written the check, $5,000 to Leonard Greer. Frank had told her it was to expedite the process. She had known what it meant. She said she had watched Frank work me like hired labor for 18 years and had said nothing because she was afraid of him. She said she couldn't do it anymore. Frank went a deep mottled red from the collar upward. The judge let Sandra finish. Then she told Frank that one more outburst would result in contempt. He sat very still, and for the first time in my life I watched him look afraid. The judge took 12 minutes to review the final documents. I watched the clock on the courtroom wall, the old kind with a second hand that ticks instead of sweeps, and counted every rotation. When she looked up, she addressed me first. She said she would use my correct name now because the evidence compelled it. She stated that the voluntary relinquishment of parental rights filed in 2005 bore a signature determined by certified forensic analysis to be fraudulent, that Daniel Whitmore had never consented to the termination of his parental rights, that the adoption had therefore been built on forgery, facilitated by a direct payment to the assigned social worker. She turned to Frank. She declared the adoption void, annulled in its entirety. She ordered Frank and Sandra Dalton to make full restitution of all adoption assistance funds received, $174,960, to the Commonwealth of Virginia. She referred the matter to the district attorney's office for investigation of potential criminal charges: forgery, fraud in connection with public assistance, and child neglect. She said, "The child's legal name is restored to Anna Whitmore, effective immediately." The gavel came down. That single wooden sound was the loudest thing I had ever heard. Louder than the slap. Louder than 18 years of silence. It sounded exactly like a lock opening. In the gallery, Ruth Paxton pressed both hands over her mouth. The church women were already gathering their purses, not making eye contact. Frank sat motionless as his lawyer packed up and left. In the hallway, Tara caught up to me. Her makeup was wrecked. She said she hadn't known about the subsidy money. She had thought it came from Frank's salary. She couldn't finish the sentence. It ended with "your money," and she couldn't say it out loud. I looked at her. The girl who had received the car, the Apple Watch, the credit card, the room with the Hollywood mirrors. I had earned the right to be angry. What I felt instead was clarity. I told her I hoped she figured out who she was without his money. That it was her journey now, not mine. She nodded, and I saw something pass across her face. Not guilt exactly, but the hairline fracture that comes before it. At the bottom of the courthouse steps, Frank was waiting. He said my old name, the one the judge had just erased from the record. He said after everything he had done for me, 18 years under his roof, this was how I repaid him. I stood on those steps in October sunlight and felt the full weight of what he had just revealed. Even now, with the ruling still in the air, he believed he was owed something. I said, "My name is Anna, and you didn't do anything for me. You did everything to me. And now it's over." I turned and walked down the remaining steps. Daniel was waiting by the escalade with the door open. He did not say anything. He held the door the way you hold a door for someone you have been waiting 18 years to hold a door for. I got in. The door closed. The last thing I saw through the tinted window was Frank Dalton standing alone on the courthouse steps, suit jacket open, watching his investment drive away. 6 months later, Richmond, Virginia. I have an apartment off Gray Street, a studio with tall windows that let in so much morning light that I sometimes just stand in it for a minute before I start my day. The windows were the first thing I looked for when I went apartment hunting. I spent 18 years in a room without one. Now I need to see the sky when I wake up. I'm enrolled in a culinary program at the community college, which is ironic in a way that I have made peace with. Frank made me cook every meal for 18 years. Now I am choosing to learn it properly. On my own terms, in a kitchen I decided to be in for reasons that belong to me. The ingredients are the same. The meaning is completely different. Frank and Sandra are awaiting trial. Forgery, fraud, child neglect. The house in Henrico County is under a second mortgage to cover the restitution payment. Frank was asked to step down from his church board. He did not go quietly. Sandra cooperated with the investigation and may receive a reduced charge. Tara moved to her aunt's house in Fredericksburg and got her first job. Retail, part-time. The first job she has ever had. I hope she builds something from it. I genuinely do. Being the favored child is its own kind of trap. When the scaffolding comes down, you find out quickly what you built while it was holding you up. In Tara's case, the answer was not much. But she is 23. There is still time. Ruth Paxton sent me a note after the ruling. 2 sentences. She said she had always known there was more to the story. She said she was glad I had come back. I see Daniel every Sunday. He makes overcooked salmon and slightly burned garlic bread and sets the table for 2 and asks about my week and actually listens to the answer. We are not a finished story. There are silences that haven't been filled yet. Gaps that 18 stolen years leave behind. But he is there every Sunday without fail. That counts for more than I knew how to express for a long time. I go to therapy on Thursdays with a woman named Dr. Torres, who has a small office with a fern and a window onto a side street and does not tell me how to feel. She asks questions and lets me find my own answers, which after 21 years of being told what to think feels like learning a language I was always supposed to speak. Some mornings I still wake at 5 in the morning, heart already racing, mind already sorting through a chore list that no longer exists. But then I open the curtains and there is the sky, and I remember exactly where I am and what it took to get here. Last Sunday, Daniel and I sat on the porch of the bungalow in the Fan District. The house in the photographs, the one with the red front door. He had his coffee. I had a book. Neither of us was talking, and it was the most comfortable silence I had ever known. At one point, he looked over and said, "I'm glad you're here." I said, "Me too." This story is not about revenge. I know it might look that way from the outside. The courtroom, the ruling, the criminal referral, the restitution order. But revenge would mean I wanted Frank to suffer the way I suffered. That is not what I wanted. What I wanted was for the truth to be said out loud, on the record, in a room that mattered, by someone with the authority to make it real. Revenge is a fire you light hoping it burns someone else. Accountability is just turning on the lights so everyone can see what was already there. Frank Dalton had told me for 18 years that I was nothing without him. That I should be grateful for the roof and the meals and the fact that he had taken me in when nobody else would. He said it so consistently that for a long time I believed it. I had been so thoroughly trained to accept his version of me that I nearly signed a legal document giving him permanent control of my finances at age 21, just because saying no felt more dangerous than saying yes. The night he hit me was the night I finally understood that the danger had always been in staying. I was not nothing without him. I was something in spite of him. Every quality he had spent 18 years trying to erase, the stubbornness, the attention to detail, The refusal to accept what didn't add up turned out to be exactly what I needed to survive what came next. If you are in a situation where someone has convinced you that you owe them your compliance, your silence, your labor, your gratitude for being tolerated, I want you to hear this clearly. You do not owe anyone your life. The bravest thing I ever did was not walking out that door with $340 and a bruise on my face. That was survival. The bravest thing I ever did was standing in a courtroom and saying, out loud and on record, that what had been done to me was wrong, not asking anyone to fix it for me, not performing distress for an audience, just stating the facts clearly and trusting that the truth was enough. It was. Family is not a legal document. It is not a court decree built on a forged signature. It is not someone who keeps you around because the state sends a check every month. Family is the person who says, of course, when you ask for proof instead of blind faith. The person who holds the door without requiring you to be grateful for it. The person who sits across from you at a Sunday dinner with overcooked salmon and asks how your week was and actually means it. I know who I am now. I know my name, my mother's face, where I came from. I know the house with the red door and what it felt like to be brought home to it the first time, standing in the living room while Daniel pointed out where each piece of furniture had been in the photographs. I know the weight of a wool blanket that smelled like cardboard, and I know what it is to sleep under white hotel sheets that smell like detergent. And I know which one I choose now. I choose the light through the window every morning. I choose the sky. And if this story found you at the right moment, if you've ever been made to feel like a burden by the very people profiting from your presence, I have another story waiting for you right now. A woman who gave everything she had to a family that never once asked how she was doing, until the day she finally walked out and they discovered what they had lost. The link is on your screen right now. I'll see you there.